Welcome to Living Life in the End for the Successful and Fulfilled Woman. I am your host, Dr. Stephanie D. Barnes, the liberated lawyer. I help women to get everything they desire in life by equipping them with powerful strategies to achieve the fulfillment they desire and deserve. Who said you can't have it all? Clearly, they did not know about living life in the end. When women make powerful decisions and create great strategies, they can have everything they desire in life. Girlfriend, forget about choosing between being successful or fulfilled. You can be successful and fulfilled. It's time for you to get everything you desire and deserve. It's time for you to live your life on purpose. It's time for you to live a life that is fulfilled, meaningful, and full of joy. It's time for you to walk boldly in the power of your decisions. If you are going to be in this world, you need to be fulfilled in this life. Life is too long to be unfulfilled. Join me for another episode of Living Life in the End, where you learn how to live fulfilled, fit, and free. Hey, it's time. It's time for another installation of Conversations, Libations, and Revelations. Real talk for real life. How can we be fulfilled if we are not for real? You know, this is a great time for you to listen in for a great conversation with a great purpose. We're not just chit-chatting, we are talking about real life issues where we are living our lives in the end. Sometimes we have our favorite grown woman beverage. Tonight. We will be libation free, but the spirits will still be flowing. And as these conversations and revelations unfold, it is an opportunity for things to get real. So I'm excited about my guest today, as I always am. I'm excited to introduce to you and bring to the Living Life in the End stage, if you will, or studio, Dr. Lisa Hunsicker. Hi, Dr. Lisa.
Hey, how you doing? How's it going?
Doing so well. So glad to have you here. And girlfriends, we are in for a treat. So I'm gonna put my official glasses on so that I can see for real, and let you know a little bit about my friend, Dr. Lisa. Dr. Lisa, MD, FACS, Fellows of the Academy of
Surgery. American Fellow of the American College of
The
Surgeons.
American College of Surgery, yes. I
That's
had
right.
it and then I forgot it as soon as I got ready to say it. But she's, of course, a board certified plastic surgeon, transformational speaker, and creator of the Soulful Surgeon podcast, a powerful space where healthcare professionals and high achievers alike come to feel seen, heard, and whole. With over 2 decades of leadership in medicine, Dr. Lisa, as I love to call her, brings a rare fusion of clinical precision and health-centered wisdom to her work. A passionate advocate for emotional resilience and authentic leadership, she helps executives, physicians, and entrepreneurs reconnect with their core values, navigate high stress environments with grace, and lead from a place of wholeness rather than burnout. Her upcoming workbook, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on in our conversation, offers a practical framework for protecting and restoring the heart through life's demanding seasons. Now, this is something that is really cool about Dr. Lisa. You've heard about her professional life as a surgeon, But not only that, she is a little bit of an adventurer. She is a race car driver, which I just think is just the coolest thing. And that is the great thing about high achieving women. We can be full of lots of fun inside our professions, but we have a lot going on outside. So, like I said, she is a race car driver. I love this, a certified sommelier, and a scuba dive master, mother, and wife. And through all of this, she models what it means to integrate ambition with presence and success and soul. And so we are just so excited to not only hear about all the great things that Dr. Lisa does as a physician, but to learn about that side of her that leaves us truly inspired, transformed, ready to lead with courage, clarity, and heart. Welcome again, Dr. Lisa.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stephanie. It's great to be here. It's good to see you in person.
Yes, I know. We have known each other for, I guess, about a year now. Yeah. Or maybe a little
Right.
bit more than that. And
Maybe
we
a little bit
really met,
longer.
yeah, a little bit longer than that. Yeah, because we met maybe January of last year. So going on, I guess, almost 2 years. But we met in person for the first time this summer. You'll hear some more about that. So it's always great to reconnect. So, Lisa, Dr. Lisa, I always love to kind of start with letting you give your version of who you are. Of course, everyone has heard your awesome bio, but I want you to share with our audience the who, the what, and the why. So tell us, who are you? Who is the real Dr. Lisa? What you do and why you live your life in the end. And I always have to make sure with living life in the end, that's where we use the power of our choices to create the life we desire and deserve. So you need me to go back over any of that. Let me know. But give us the who, the what, and the why.
Okay, great. Well, the who, hi, I'm Dr. Lisa Hunsicker. I'm a board certified plastic surgeon. I have a private practice in Denver, Colorado. And my practice, I do both cosmetic and reconstructive surgery. I do some breast cancer reconstruction in addition to that. So that is my professional life. I have lots of hobbies. As you mentioned, I am a race car driver. I am a sommelier. I am a dive master. There's so much. This life is so short. And I think one of the things about being a physician and certainly a surgeon who works in oncology a fair amount, you see how precious life is and how short it can be. And so for me, I'm trying to add all the ands of all the things all the time. My why is, again, this life is short and I want to do as much as I can for my patients, but certainly with the podcast, with Soulful Surgeon Podcast, this podcast I developed in response to healthcare worker burnout. And really, I almost feel like we're kind of to the point where, we're hearing about burnout. And I think if myself or any other healthcare provider hears, oh, just take a hot bath,
Yeah.
just like, oh, go for a walk and take a hot bath. I think that things have gotten so difficult in medicine right now that I think a lot of folks feel like they need to either die out or ring out, that's the way to escape burnout. And so in my world, I'm trying to give folks a voice that we've not really had. There's lots of people representing patients and insurance companies and hospital systems, but there really hasn't been a true voice for the healthcare worker. So that's what I'm trying to do with that, and just really trying to present to this community that we're human beings and not human doings. We're not human machines. Right. And so really trying to create a platform for that conversation.
Yes. And, that is something that I believe is just so critically important to not just health professionals in general, specifically, but for all of us to have a purpose and have a way to live our lives other than just going through the day-to-day tasks. Because certainly being in the healthcare profession, it is one of the most demanding professions, because not only must you be skilled clinicians, you got to know what you're doing, especially surgery, but you are dealing with other human beings, and it's not just a lifeless something that you're tinkering on. You're not building widgets, as they say, but you are giving other human beings another opportunity at life. You are helping them to be healthier, and there's a lot of emotion that comes along with that. And I was so excited about us having the opportunity to talk, because we have so many things in common, and we're approaching it from different perspectives. You talk about life being short and it's important to enjoy it. I look at it from the kind of other end of that: life is too long to be unfulfilled. So it's important for us to have interests outside of what we do, because like you say, we are human beings, not just humans doing. And it's so easy to get caught up in the things that we do in the high pace, intense areas of our lives, and not be able to fully enjoy. So before we get into your work that is focused on healthcare workers and helping them to overcome burnout, I want to hear, how did you become a race driver? Why did you pick that? How did that come about? That's just so cool.
Well, I've been driving really fast illegally for a long time.
It's funny.
Going back to when I was a teenager. And so I may or may not have raced an old Caprice Classic at the beach when my folks thought I was at the movies with my girlfriends. But no, I grew up, my dad had a 1972 Corvette. And so that's kind of what I was cultivated in. And that was what I saw as a little kid. And so that just always seemed to be what my goal was. And so I love the feel of speed. I love the presence of it. There's no past in that. There's only in that moment and looking a few short moments ahead, because if you look too far forward, you miss what's happening. And so it's something that I learned very, very early on that I really liked. And then in 2015, I finally got my competition license and started racing, because I did really, again, being a surgeon, you begin to understand what happens out there when there's street racing. And so it's much safer on a racetrack with all the equipment. And I first started driving in my 911 street car. I drive Porsches. And so that was great, but it became very apparent very quickly that this car was not safe because it wasn't prepared for racing. And there's just so much more that goes into it. So I ended up buying a 1984 911 race car, and then now I have a 2009 Porsche Cayman race car, but it has the full roll cage. Everything is pretty much ripped out of it. Right. And so it really is, I like to think of it as a presence car. It's a present to me, of course, but it's a presence car because everything that occurs in there is always in the moment. And so being as present as possible, because if you're not paying attention and you're not focused in that moment, you can't win, and you certainly can't navigate all the traffic racing. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and yeah, that's such a great analogy. In addition to like race car driving literally being an opportunity to test speed and precision and execution, I love how you have grasped the importance of being present, and how important that is to being able to actually perform optimally. Is you aren't able to, because if your mind is not focused on what you're doing at this moment, you miss out.
Right.
And it could have obviously very detrimental outcomes. And I think that's important for us to recognize in life, how important it is to be present, how that is an essential aspect of us finding fulfillment and being able to enjoy where we are now, is to enjoy where we are now so that, we are able to move forward from a place of peace and contentment that allows us to enjoy life even more. So that's a great analogy.
One of the interesting things is that it really has affected my surgical practice, and my surgical practice has really affected this.
Uh-huh.
And you wouldn't think about it. So, one of the things that we do in surgery is we do a timeout before we start every case, and we go through all the things, our checklist, and then at the end of the surgery we do a debrief. And so that has really brought so much more security for me and safety for me and preparing. We have entire checklists that are sitting on the cars that we go through, and then we debrief afterwards. How was the steering? How was the balance? What do we need to adjust? And so it's been great. But the other thing is that it really, going back and forth, is safety.
Mm-hmm.
And when I approach surgery with my patients, safety is number one, and that's something that I really won't compromise on. And this is, with racing, it's a really important because it's not patient safety, it's my own safety.
Right.
So really, it's very no compromise, and it has to be precision based, which it really does appeal to that surgeon side of me, because my safety is important, and of course my patient safety is important too. So it's a nice trade back and forth, because I think they flow very easily between one another.
Right. So it's not necessarily that you are doing something that is just such a drastic, in such a drastic, different direction than where you are. The principles are very parallel, and like you say, one feeds off the other.
Right.
Because of course, yes, 'cause I'm a former healthcare executive, so I was a general counsel for a health system, and I had responsibility for the risk management program. And I remember one of my very first like big incidents that I had to oversee the root cause analysis and all of that was a foreign object being left during surgery. And I remember understanding about the universal protocol and the importance of marking, where you are, which part of the body is going to be operated on and the sponge count, etc. But that is like, a like you have been able to do in finding parallels between surgery and race car driving, that experience of the timeout and the root cause analysis and kind of that entire process of focusing on the process and not blaming people in order.
Right. Well, and it doesn't matter, because, as you know, in healthcare, you can do all the right things and a bad outcome occurs, and you can do all the wrong things and a great outcome occurs. And really, racing is the same way. Stuff happens,
Yeah.
and you just have to be prepared for it. So you do the best you can, but realize that not everything is in your control. And
Mhm.
that's one of the interesting things with racing is you kind of try and control as much as you can, but once you're in that moment, you're in free flow.
Right, right, right,
So it's not about control. You control the car, obviously, but really the car is part of you, and you're part of the car, and you're just in flow.
right. And you're just dropping so many great nuggets that are analogous to how we can live more meaningful lives. It's like to understand how to kind of surrender to the moment so that we're able to be in flow and to avoid creating tension and friction where there could be, a smooth path. And part of that is becoming kind of one with what we're doing rather than making it more complicated than it ought to be. Yes. Yes. So that's a great analogy. So, you of course have experienced the pressures of being a healthcare worker yourself, as a surgeon, uh, being able to deal with the pressures of, taking care of your patients, dealing with all of the, I'll call them kind of behind the scene things, because you don't just show up to the operating room. There's a lot that goes into that, your office, working with the hospitals, the hospital staff, nursing, and all of that. There's a whole cohesion of people working together and systems working together to allow you to, have that opportunity to take care of patients. What made you really commit to not only seeking this peace for yourself and finding these ways of living your life and being more than a human doing, actually being a human being, to not only want that for yourself, but to want to do that for others?
Well, this has been an evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been practicing medicine now for 30 years. And so there are so many things that have occurred over the years. And, this, you look at all these things that we're talking about, and well, she's a race car driver and a dive master, and she's a plastic surgeon, and she's a podcaster. And so you think, wow, she's really got it going on. She's on top of the world. But like in 2012, the world was on top of me at that point. And what was going on, I was a newly single mom, had just been divorced, have a young son who has ADHD, and we were navigating that and trying to manage a solo private practice by myself, and just all of the things that were going on with that. And, one day it was too much. And I came into work. It was all right. You have a elementary school kiddo, and getting him to school was like wrestling a marlin. I'm like, can you just get dressed and in the car? Can we go? And so, when you show up to work and you have to be present and you have to be on, so you don't only have to be present, you have to be present to be with these people, but you're already coming in really stressed out from all of that. And then it was just a crazy day. I was super busy, and the schedule, I was double booked most of the day. And so I'm stuck in these little 8x10 rooms, and it's hot and it's stuffy, and I'm running late because I'm double booked. And so one of the other things that was going on, one of my very dear patients was actually dying of breast cancer. She was actually at home in the process of dying, and we needed to get to her, but I had this full clinic and I couldn't get to her. And so we're trying to make arrangements with the staff. And so I was running late. I went in to see this patient, and I apologized. I said, I'm so sorry I've kept you waiting. We have this breast cancer patient who's dying, and so sorry to keep you waiting. And she was so rude, and she was so obnoxious, and she just looked at me and like, I don't really care about you. And she just says, I don't really care what's going on. I just need you to make these wrinkles go away, and I need you to Botox me now. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And so all these things and all the stress, it was just too much. And so I just go back into my office, and I'm just in the sweat, and I can barely breathe. I'm sick to my stomach, and I realize I'm suicidal. Like I just can't do anything. And so part of the problem, I feel like, as healthcare workers, everything is in algorithms, and it's black and white, and it's all or nothing. And so you almost get conditioned to some degree of, wow, I've got to be this perfect person, and this flow has to be perfect, and all the patients have to be perfect, and everything's perfect, and it's not. And so for me, it just seemed like that suicide was going to be a good choice, which really tells you kind of where my head was at, and more importantly, where it was not at. So I ended up going to the ER, and in a very short period of time, and meeting with the ER physician, they realized I meet criteria and I need to be admitted, but I realized I have a breast cancer surgery the next morning, and we both agree that it's a good idea for me to sign out and go do surgery in the morning. So as a it in that moment, I was not a physician, I was a patient. And it
Mhm.
wasn't, I was doing what was best for the patient and not what was best for
Yes,
me. And the
right.
physician who was responsible for me really negotiated me and allowed me to negotiate me and said, okay, go do your surgery. So this is really the inherent issue. And so this really has had me thinking about this for some time. Now, fast forward to last year, and we're having dinner with a colleague, and she she's been at dinner for 3 hours, and she says, "Hey, I'm supposed to be flying to South Africa on Friday." And I said, "Well, that's fantastic." And she said, "Can I ask you a question? I've been having shortness of breath for 3 months, and I've been having chest pain for 3 weeks. Do you think it's okay if I fly?"
Oh, goodness.
And so, I mean, everybody knows you're having chest pain, you go to the ER. And that's exactly what we said. You have to go to the ER. And here, this medical professional who knows all these answers, right? She knows what she needs to be doing, but she's not.
Right.
She has a very busy practice. She has lots of practitioners under her. She has all these patients. And so it's all these people are coming before her. And, we said, look, you have to go to the ER. And so what she ended up doing was going home and cleaning the house.
Ah, goodness.
So she cleans the house, and then she goes next morning to her PCP, who they finally drag her to the ER, and she ends up getting admitted to the ICU, and she's in fulminant heart failure.
Oh,
And
good.
so this ensues and takes months to even begin to figure out and begin treatment. So she's doing well now, but this was such a powerful representation of neglect, and
Yeah.
it was so obvious. So if I had presented that to her as a patient,
Yes, she would have, yes,
she would have
immediately.
grabbed me by the arm and literally walked me into the ER, like no
Yeah,
no question. But when it's turned around on the other side,
right.
it's completely negotiable, and we really aren't in the mindset to consider how we are. We think about when we fly, and they talk about if there's loss of cabin pressure, put
Right.
your own mask on first and then, put it on someone else afterwards. But really in medicine, that's not the case. And the way that we're taught is you go down with the plane and make sure everyone's mask is on. And if you survive, whatever, I guess great. But
Right.
if not, whatever, because there's more people like you.
Right.
So that was really the motivation for all of this.
Yes. And that's something that I know that many of us can relate to is especially as women, we will take care of everyone else before we take care of ourselves. And one of the things that I always stress is that, you cannot pour from an empty cup. And
Right.
it's so important to take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. And many times even the notion of doing something for yourself can seem like it is something selfish, or people can characterize it that way. Oh, you're being selfish by taking care of yourself. But the truth is, if you're not here to take care of those that you love or do the things that you love to do, then you won't be able to be fully fulfilled, and you won't be the best you that you can for others. And so I can only imagine, as you've alluded, how exponentially hard it is for a healthcare worker. Because one of the things I remember is being in a hospital on the Mississippi Gulf Coast during the hurricanes, and specifically during Katrina. Because while I was at the health system, I was there for 10 years, and I think we had, I don't know, maybe 5 hurricanes, Katrina being the worst. And, the thing that I remember, like the first time I was an executive, and so they had administrators, all the administrators had to be on call as well. I wasn't taking care of patients, but, we had to lock everyone in. And I just remember the reality of what that meant, because I had 2 kids. My ex-husband my husband at the time was a physician. He was on call, so he had to report to the hospital, and I had two young children. And so I was like, well, what am I going to do with my kids? Because we couldn't bring our children to the hospital. So I had to, drive them to my parents. My dad met me halfway, and got them. But I began to think about all the other nurses and technicians and physicians who had children. And, I was in a panic because here I was, this little lawyer. This was my first time dealing with this type of situation. And they were taking it in stride. It was part of just kind of, how they lived. And so that gave me a lot more compassion for the clinicians in the hospital who, you know, had that sense of loyalty and dedication to their patients. So when you think about, those situations where you are wanting to be of service and to encourage your colleagues and just other healthcare professionals to take care of themselves, what is kind of one of the first things, that you would do, or what is the first thing you would do? How would you help them to begin to appreciate how important it is for them to take care of themselves?
Well, I think health is wealth. And so, of course, health is going to be number one. If you don't have good health, then you don't need to worry about future because,
Right.
well, you might not even be here. And if you are, then it's not the quality of life that you're looking for in the first place. And so it's not just physical health, it's also mental health. And I think that is an area in medicine that we have really struggled with because mental illness and struggles are throughout healthcare. What we do is really, really hard and it has a toll on us. We look at first responders, fire, police, all the paramedics and EMTs. And so dealing with the on scene trauma, and then, of course, all the trauma that occurs in the hospital. And so processing that, we don't really have a very good way of dealing with that. And so, much like we have, like in the OR, the timeout and then the debrief afterwards, really trying to get more concentrated debriefs regularly, which I think, my wife is a trauma surgeon. And so sometimes they have debriefs after really severe, really stressful traumas that maybe have a terrible outcome. And especially, I would say, pediatric trauma, it would be the worst, of course. And I mean, I even think about my wife. And so she had a young boy who sustained a gunshot wound to the chest. He was young. I think he was like 9 or 10 years old. And the kids were playing with the guns and the gun discharged and it shot him in the chest. And so here she is dealing with this kiddo, and the kiddo passes away. And the process of that, of doing heroic measures, is incredible, and it's incredibly stressful, and it's incredibly invasive. And it's difficult to do on any person, but certainly doing on a child. Now, she finishes with that, and then usually they would do a debrief, but she was on a panel in the hospital that she was a speaker on, and she literally comes out of this traumatic event and then changes her scrubs and goes right into this panel and literally wants to throw up in front of these people, but has to be on. And really that's what happens, especially in the emergency departments or the labor deck, with women having babies. There can be something really difficult going on in one room and something totally benign in the room next to it. And that same person is navigating both of those. And so part of it is just being able to transition from that. And so what ends up happening is you just become walled off. And you have your shield up. The problem is that, again, we're in algorithms and we become autopilot. And so then we just never really navigate those feelings. And so I think doing, your physical fitness, but also your mental fitness to be able to deal with that, and really having more resources would be amazing. and not trying to save it up for, well, we do this once a month. It really needs to be after every shift.
So, what are some of the things that you touch on? Of course, the importance of mental health and the role or the foundation, really, that it is for everything that we do. And certainly, when we experience, or when a healthcare professional or anyone for that matter experiences these intense or traumatic, emotionally draining situations, it's important to have a practice to allow them to decompress and debrief and to deal with that in a healthy way. But what are some things that you've done or recommend or think about recommending to others to have more consistent practice that kind of builds up mental resilience so that they are in an even better space when these intense moments arrive?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think community is really important, and I think relationships with our close, members, whoever our core group is, our really close friends, our family, and being able to connect with them so that they understand what's happening. For me, the other thing that's really important is a spiritual practice. And so I am a big fan of meditating. And so I usually start my day, I wake up and then meditate somewhere between 10 to 30 minutes every day, just depending on what my hour schedule's like, what my day looks like, but usually as much as I can, because I think that is a grounding practice in really seeing yourself outside of all these stressful events and really focusing on relaxation, breathing, and really thinking about what your purpose is. When we talk about how to deal with this, I like to think about it. I call it the 7 remedies of being. And so the first really has to do with what do you do for yourself? And so that's the physical and the mental, but it's spiritual and also sensory. It's your sensory being that we have to pay attention to. And people think about, well, we have our 5 senses, but what goes beyond that? And really that's more like intuition and listening to your gut, because a lot of times you may not have the answer in the moment it's needed, but you have a feeling about it, and that's your inner sense telling you what to do. But really taking that now from inside that person to how do we relate to other people. And so that's your relational being and your community being. And for me, relational is how do we relate to our kids, our spouses, our parents, our brothers and sisters, all of our family members, all of our close friends, and how are we showing up or maybe not showing up, and what does that look like, and making sure that we do show up and making time for that. But the other thing is community. It's our social community, maybe church communities. For me, I have a race community, a dive community. But the other thing is the community in healthcare of making sure that healthcare workers are coming together. And then finally, the last one is really your intentional being. What's your purpose and why are you even here? And I think that for a lot of folks, I think we're on the grind and we're on autopilot. And I'm here because I've got to get up and go to work and I've got to do 4 surgeries and then I have to figure out how to get the kid to the basketball. Like it's just this mundane thing, but really stopping it. And in those moments of meditation, really saying, who am I? Who is Lisa Hunsicker? Mm-hmm. Who is this person? And what's the important things to her? So living a life of gratitude. I start my day with a gratitude list. When I wake up, I give thanks every day for my good health, my family's good health, our happiness, our safety. Because there's so many places, in this world where maybe that's, we have a luxury of that and other people don't. But then end my day, and it doesn't matter what the day is and how it went, still being grateful for those things and all the great things that happened during the day, but really thinking about what is my purpose. And so, I'm helping people at work as a healthcare worker, but really it's connecting with people, understanding their needs, being really present with them in a difficult situation, but then also leading them into a better place. And I kind of feel like that's more or less the same thing in what I'm doing with this podcast and really working with healthcare workers. And we need to really have this out in the open, because I think this is a conversation that happens in the call rooms and in the locker rooms and on the wards, but really isn't going any further than that. And so really being able to lead people and creating ripple effects of teaching people how to do this and let them lead, so that we need to heal generational trauma, that we've all been taught this, and we have to, one, unwind that, number one, but two, we have to teach the new round of people that there is something better. We have to let go of this stoicism and you're weak kind
Yeah,
of mentality.
right. Because that is so important to, or it is so very critical to overcome this stigma of needing help and needing a break and needing to take care of yourself. And like you say, for so long, even medical training, a component of that. There have been changes to the graduate medical education, approach over years. But, even when you think about how physicians have been trained over the years, they are trained to not need sleep when that is something that is critical and impacts mental health. So, but I think it is so um, special that you are special. Really, one word I was looking for. I was grasping for the word, but I didn't want to have too much space. But oh,
You made fireworks. Let's see. I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if my camera will do that.
that's great. 'Cause I guess, see, that's the magic of what
Yeah,
you're doing. You're doing something truly magical, Dr.
exactly.
Lisa.
That was fantastic.
That it is, so brave. That's really the word I was looking for. Brave and courageous to, one, not only tell your story, but to give others a platform to tell theirs and to equip them with tools that allow them to more freely embrace their own mental health needs, their own rest needs. Because I always say to myself and say to others, rest is productive, and rest is often looked upon as a luxury or something that is, you can even be called lazy sometimes for needing rest, or you just need to push through it. No, rest is productive. And I always like to think about it from the perspective of an arrow. In order for an arrow to go forward, it's got to move back. And so you've got to have that opportunity to rest and recuperate and regenerate your mind, body, and spirit.
I think
So,
it's interesting. The literature supports that, and
mhm,
so if you look at the medical literature, especially regarding sleep, the data
mhm.
shows that sleep deprivation
Oh
causes
God.
all kinds of problems, and you can actually be impaired,
Yeah,
not too different from, say, being drunk. And
right.
the cumulative effects long term leads
Mhm,
to dementia. And
mhm.
so the interesting is we know this, but we as a community breed this. We have, because we are working 24-hour shifts. I know that at our hospital, there are some trauma surgeons who actually take 48 hours, which I don't know how that even can be a thing, but it is. But when you think about the graduate medical education, they have limited how all of these young people are trained. And then as soon as they come out, the rules are exactly the way they were before that
Right,
training, change occurred. And so people are not being successful, and you have this big clash of
right,
culture in that.
right. And that's something, and we could have a whole nother podcast episode on just the unwillingness many times for not necessarily older generations, not necessarily an age thing, but it's a culture, because you have this mentality where I suffered, so everybody else has to suffer. Because I remember hearing the denigrating remarks about the residents, needing to sleep and characterizing that in a way as something was, you know, deficient about them or defective about them, because they had the ability to tap into this biological source of regeneration. And, why not accept that as a professional, as a seasoned surgeon, as a seasoned physician, and whatever the case may be, that, you can embrace something new and break the cycle of suffering. But anyway, we don't often do that. But, you and I, of course, we have so many things in common. Our platforms, we have, different specific focus, but the way and the general theme of fulfillment and being able to be in touch with our souls, be in touch with who we are as human beings is something that is so closely woven. And we also have the commonality of having worked together and learned from our coach, Patrice Washington. And that's how we met about almost 2 years ago, and got a chance to really get to know each other over the past year in our wisdom circle. But we got a chance to meet this summer while we were in Hawaii. And you've talked about just the importance of community. And I know that not only you had been working with Patrice before I had, and you did this program called Command the Stage. And I'd love to just learn more about, or hear more from you about how you were able to craft your story in such a powerful way.
Well, I have to tell you, I love Patrice Washington. Everything Patrice Washington, I think, is life changing. I think for me, from the standpoint of really kind of readjusting my frame of really, I need to pay attention to me. And once we get me sorted, then you can be present to do all these other things. And I think that, I read her book, Redefining Wealth, which I think is amazing. It really breaks it down very nicely of all the different things to focus on to be sure that you're in the right physical and mindset, and all of these things are really looking at wealth, but wealth much beyond what money is in your bank account, but really wealth of all the things that life has to offer. So I had been working with Patrice, and I think by having this major shift in my overall thinking, and I think it was for the first time, I did a podcast with Patrice, and one of the things that she and I in our coaching have talked a lot about is perfection. And I think as healthcare workers, we are really pinned to the wall with perfection because that's the expectation. And then, of course, if you're not perfect, then maybe people get hurt or they die and you get sued. And so it's horror show, horror show, horror show. So it really, the importance of perfection is really beat into you. And so really trying to unwind that, it's so ingrained in the core. And the thing that I really appreciate most about Patrice is really giving me a platform to be able to understand that actually perfectionism is not what I need to be striving for, because it's a lockbox that you get stuck in. And so for me, I've kind of evolved, and my definition of perfection is excellence without the ability to breathe or pivot. And I think that, there's many times that we get into situations where, yes, we're prepared for them. And so all the things we know that works wonderfully. But if you're in a situation where you don't necessarily have that, you have to be able to pivot, but you have to breathe, because you have to take a moment to compose yourself so that you can get on with whatever hard thing that you're going to do. And I think that really Patrice gave me really reflect. It's a mirror, right? And reflecting it back at myself of like, this is not healthy. And we have to stop that language, because patients use that language and colleagues use that language. And it's almost like this martyr characteristic that we talk about, but really it's not in the patient's best interest nor our own. And so that really was my evolution. And then when this event happened with my friend at dinner and she's having chest pain, it was too much. And I just said, you know what, we have to do something. And so I started working with Patrice and Command the Stage, and it's really being able to voice these kinds of conversations and these experiences to begin to transform your speaking into a whole new level. And I've been a national speaker. I've spoken at national symposiums in front of thousands of people. But really, this was being able to bring a very heartfelt message that resonated to the core with people, to be able to really deliver that message, but also give them the tools to be able to navigate that if they're in that same situation. So I did that. And then of course I did Mastery of Momentum, which we did together, and we had the opportunity to go to Kauai, which was wonderful, and just meet more people who were very like-hearted in that way.
Yes. Community is so important. And I think high achieving women, high achieving people in particular, we get fooled and lulled by our individual accomplishments and somehow think that we're supposed to do everything ourselves. We shouldn't need help because we're high achieving. We have done all these great things, because certainly we go through the process of getting the degrees and achieving the things, and we certainly do that ourselves, but we are enabled and empowered by the community that we have. And so you are creating that for your healthcare professional colleagues in giving them a community, giving them a platform, and giving them the courage to acknowledge that this is something that they need and something that they can embrace, and that when they embrace it, it's not a negative reflection on them at all. And I know that you have developed a workbook that is a tool to kind of help bring this community and resources and commitment to being human beings, not just humans doing, to life. So tell me a little bit more about your workbook and where people can find it. What's going on with that?
Well, we're still in the finalizing part of it right now. I'm working with two wonderful, honestly exceptional women, Kathy Taylor and Xavier Lata. And so we're putting together, it's called the Heart of It All Tour. And the thing that I like about this is all very heart-led conversation. And so Kathy Taylor, who I really adore, she can just take and turn so much massive information and reprocess it into such a heartfelt way. And so she has a book called Lead with Heart. And so that's part of this speaking tour. Xavier is doing grief, and how do we connect to ourselves in grief. And my portion is really, how do we connect to the heart? And more importantly, how do we reconnect back? And so, like I was talking about, we do all these really difficult things, and it could be a healthcare worker, it could be a CEO, it could be a parent navigating some family issue, but you're doing all these really difficult things, and you have the shield up, but you're not putting the shield down. And so it ends up turning into armor, and then ultimately into a wall. And so you're just going around with this big, huge disconnection. And so for me, in talking about heart, I really like to just be very concise about it, that you need to protect, you need to connect, and then you need to reflect. And so protect your heart when you're doing the hard things. Reconnect back up to it when you're done. Put that armor down, and then reflect, because obviously if we're going to learn something, we need to look at what's transpired, and we need to be as authentic in that moment and really be insightful of what went well, what could have done better, and how was I in that, how could I maybe done things differently. But if you don't have the insight to want to do that, you're not going to do that. But even if you have the insightfulness to say, well, I really need to look at this, if you can't connect to your heart and you can't connect to the situation and how that affected you, I think you're missing a tremendous piece from that. So I think this is going to tie that all together. So that's why the workbook is going to be called The Strength to Lay It Down.
Yes, and that's such a great and powerful title in that it does take strength to realize that you need to let go. And it seems kind of antithetical that, that that shouldn't be that way, but it is. And none of what you are advocating for is in any way tied to being weak. It truly is tied to being strong enough to recognize that you need to lay it down. You need to let it go. So I am so excited about the work that you're doing, excited to hear more about the tour. I know that y'all are working on that, and we will hear more information about that as soon as you get all your tour dates together. But it is certainly going to be life changing. And one last thing, just to note that you have an executive, Kathy Taylor, in the work that she does with helping other leaders to connect to their hearts. You have Xavier, who is a grieving mother, who is helping people to connect to to heal their hearts. And then you have you as a surgeon, who is, although you're not a heart surgeon, but you still are helping people to reconnect and recognizing that the work that you do is tied to your heart and the hearts of those that you take care of. So that is it's always great to see how we can be in different walks of life but have those commonalities that connect us. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more about the tour and the workbook and seeing you really amplify the Soulful Surgeon platform. That is definitely a much needed balm, I like to say, for allowing your colleagues, allowing those who heal others to heal themselves. So I am, excited to, share your information about where people can find you. And before we do that, if you had one thing that you would want to leave the audience with, what would that one thing be?
Well, it'd be that we are human beings, not human doings.
Yes, yes. It is so important to just recognize that we are, we have souls and we need to take care of our souls and our hearts, just like we take care of the physical parts of our lives. And I tell you one thing that has resonated the most with me about what you've shared, and it's again tying back, the things that you love to do outside of the operating room and the skills that you bring to the operating rules in that room, and that is the importance of being present. That your presence allows you to develop a foundation that enables you to really tap into the now so that you're able to go further and to really be in flow. So that's what has resonated with me the most. So I would love for you to share with our listeners, how can they keep up with Dr. Lisa and her race driving and her wine expertise and her scuba diving and her goal to help healthcare workers to connect to their hearts?
Well, we have several different ways. Certainly, my private practice is Ravala Plastic Surgery. So we are on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, and so all the different social media platforms. And our website is revala.com, REVALLA.com. And then for the Soulful Surgeon, it's just soulfulsurgeon.com. And we're on Instagram at Soulful Surgeon, and also LinkedIn, Lisa Hunsicker, MD. Can find me there too. And you can find me at most racetracks, especially around Colorado.
That's awesome. But don't you worry, if you didn't get all of that, I'm going to have that in the show notes so that we can keep up with Lisa. We might have a really hard time literally keeping up with Lisa as she is racing around that track, but certainly we want to remain connected to the Soulful Surgeon because you have a message that is truly powerful and something that all of us can connect to. And as you say, it's important for us to protect our hearts, to reconnect to ourselves and our community, and to reflect on why we're here. And each of us has a purpose. And when we are present in our lives, we're able to connect to that. So thank you so much, Dr. Lisa, for joining me. It has truly been a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this conversation, and I'm grateful that I've had an opportunity to share with our audience.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here and great to see you.
Yes, indeed, indeed. So hopefully, we'll get to see you. One of these days, I'm gonna have to pop out to Colorado and
Come on out.
come watch you race because, I'm still on the speeding illegally side. I'm not transcended to where I can speed lawfully. So
I can help you with that.
all right, all right. But thank you so much. And I just want to thank all of you who have joined for another installation of Conversations, Libations, and Revelations. Here's to keeping it real. This episode was brought to you by the Successful and Fulfilled Woman, New You Transformation, a VIP day for the high-achieving woman who is ready to be successful and fulfilled. If you are a woman who feels burned out and uninspired, or you are a woman ready to start over after a divorce, death, or other disruption, or you are a mother whose children are ready to leave the nest or are already gone, and you are now ready to create a meaningful life for yourself, or you are a woman who's approaching your golden years and you want the next half to be the best half, or you are a woman who's ready to get more out of life and ready to stop marking time and start living life, then we need to have a revelation conversation. Go to www.everythingideserve.com to schedule your complimentary revelation conversation, where together we will talk about where you are now and where you want to be, and begin to develop a plan to get you where you desire to be. You will leave your revelation conversation understanding the first thing that you can start doing today to begin living a successful and fulfilled life. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Living Life in the And for the Successful and Fulfilled Woman. Please be sure to let me know what made you feel something, what you learned, and what moved you to action. Please subscribe so you don't miss out on a great conversation. And don't forget to rate and review the podcast and let me know how you are living life in the end. Life is too long to be unfulfilled. Don't keep all this goodness to yourself. Tell someone else to listen for themselves. We should all be fulfilled. Remember, your life is the product of your choices. Choose to commit to bringing the desires of your heart to completion. You don't get what you deserve until you get what you decide. Life is too long to be unfulfilled.